The old station wagon rattled over the country road as Olivia gripped the dashboard, her eyes wide at the scenery that unfolded before them. Rolling hills stretched into the distance, dotted with trees wearing their autumn colors. It was nothing, like their cramped apartment back in the city. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she asked, glancing at her husband. Ethan squinted at the road ahead, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding a crumpled map. "That's what Mrs. Henderson said. Just past the covered bridge, then left at the fork." They weren't looking for anything fancy. Just a small cottage, something with a bit of charm and enough space for them to start a family. After 5 years of marriage and endless overtime at their jobs, they had finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest country home. The car bumped over a wooden bridge, the planks creaking under their tires. "There's the fork," Olivia pointed. "Turn left." The road narrowed, winding through thick woods until suddenly the trees parted, revealing a clearing. Olivia's mouth fell open. "That can't be right," Ethan muttered, slowing the car to a crawl. Rising, before them stood a massive Victorian mansion, its weathered gray stones covered in ivy that climbed toward a slate roof punctuated by multiple chimneys. Tall windows stared down at them like watchful eyes while a wraparound porch sagged slightly with age. "Is this Thornfield Road?" Olivia checked the address on her phone. That's what the mailbox said. They pulled up to a rusty iron gate that hung partially open. A small red car was already parked in the circular driveway. As they approached, a plump woman in a bright blue suit waved enthusiastically from the porch steps. "You made it," Mrs. Henderson called out. "I was beginning to worry you'd gotten lost." Ethan and Olivia exchanged confused glances as they stepped out of their car. "There must be some mistake," Ethan said. "We're here to see the cottage on Thornfield Road, the 2-bedroom with the garden." Mrs. Henderson's smile didn't falter. "This is Thornfield Manor, just as we discussed. The price is exactly as advertised, quite the bargain considering the square footage." "But we can't afford," Olivia began. "Nonsense. The owners are practically giving it away. They're very eager to find the right people." Mrs. Henderson was already climbing the steps, keys jingling in her hand. "Come see inside before you make up your mind." Against their better judgment, they followed her through massive oak doors into a grand foyer. Sunlight streamed through, stained glass windows casting colorful patterns across a marble floor. A sweeping staircase curved up to the second level, while doorways on either side opened to glimpses of high-ceilinged rooms. "This is the main hall," Mrs. Henderson said, unnecessarily her voice echoing. "Original woodwork throughout, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library, formal dining room, and a kitchen that was modernized in the 1980s. Definitely out of our price range," Ethan whispered to Olivia. But she was already wandering toward one of the side rooms, drawn by what appeared to be a grand piano covered in a white sheet. "The current price reflects certain quirks of the property," Mrs. Henderson continued, lowering her voice. "Nothing structural, I assure you. The foundation is solid as a rock. It's just that the house has been on the market for quite some time." "Why?" Ethan asked. Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you know how people are about old houses. They make up stories. And of course it needs some cosmetic work. Updating the bathrooms, fresh paint. Nothing major." Olivia rejoined them, her eyes bright with excitement that Ethan recognized all too well. It was the same look she'd had when she spotted a stray puppy in the park 3 years ago. They still had that dog. "Can we see the rest?" she asked. Over the next hour, Mrs. Henderson led them through room after room. Despite the dust covers on furniture and the musty smell of disuse, there was an undeniable grandeur to the place. Olivia kept exclaiming over details: carved banisters, window, seats, a clawfoot tub in one of the bathrooms. "And here's the library," Mrs. Henderson said, pushing open a heavy door to reveal walls lined with built-in bookshelves. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while tall windows looked out onto overgrown gardens. "It's amazing," Olivia breathed, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound books that had been left behind. The previous owners left rather suddenly, Mrs. Henderson explained. Most of the furnishings were included in the estate sale, but never picked up. Ethan was about to suggest they thank Mrs. Henderson for her time and leave when he noticed a door in the far corner of the library. Where does that lead? Mrs. Henderson's smile flickered for just a moment. That's the east wing. I'm afraid that section is locked. The key was lost years ago. Nothing special there anyway, just some old bedrooms and storage. Before Ethan could ask more questions, Mrs. Henderson was already herding them back toward the main hall, chattering about the original crown molding. As they completed the tour in the kitchen, which indeed looked straight out of the 1980s with floral wallpaper and outdated appliances, Ethan prepared to make their excuses. This place was far beyond what they could afford, not to mention impractical for just the two of them. What did you say the asking price was? Olivia asked suddenly. Mrs. Henderson named a figure that made Ethan choke on air. It was less than they had budgeted for the cottage. That can't be right, he said. Oh, but it is, Mrs. Henderson assured them. As I mentioned, the owners are very motivated sellers. They believe the house chooses its owners, and they're willing to take a loss to ensure it goes to the right people. The house chooses? Ethan repeated skeptically. Mrs. Henderson shrugged. Just a saying, but I will say, not everyone who comes to view Thornfield Manor gets the same tour you did. Sometimes the house simply doesn't open up to visitors. Olivia and Ethan looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. This was crazy. They couldn't possibly buy a mansion. The heating bills alone would bankrupt them. We should discuss this, Ethan said finally. Of course, Mrs. Henderson replied. I'll wait in the car. Take your time. Once they were alone, Ethan turned to his wife. Liv, be reasonable. This place is enormous. It's probably falling apart in ways we can't see. And the upkeep. But think of the potential, Olivia interrupted, her eyes shining. We could fix it up little by little, maybe even rent out rooms once we get it in shape. There's got to be a catch, Ethan insisted. Houses like this don't sell for prices like that. Maybe not, but doesn't it feel, I don't know, right? Like we were meant to find it? Ethan was about to argue further when a strange feeling came over him, a warmth that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves, as if the house were listening, hoping. It was absurd, of course, houses didn't have feelings. And yet, 3 hours later, they sat in a small office in town, signing papers that would make them the owners of Thornfield Manor. Congratulations, Mrs. Henderson said, handing them a ring of old-fashioned keys. The house has chosen well. As they drove back to the city to pack their belongings, Ethan still couldn't believe what they had done. They owned a mansion, a genuine, historic, possibly haunted mansion. We're either the luckiest or the stupidest people alive, he muttered. Olivia just smiled, already making lists in her notebook of paint colors and furniture arrangements. 2 weeks later, they pulled up to Thornfield Manor in a rented moving truck, ready to begin their new life. The house looked different somehow, more welcoming, as if it had been waiting for them. They spent that first day carrying boxes and furniture from the truck, trying to make the cavernous rooms feel like home. By evening, they had set up their bedroom in what must have once been the master suite, though they had only their queen-sized bed and 2 nightstands to fill the enormous space. Exhausted, they ordered pizza from the only delivery place that would come out this far and ate sitting cross-legged on the floor of their new bedroom. To us, Olivia said, raising a slice and a toast, and to Thornfield Manor. To not finding out why this place was so cheap, Ethan added with a wry smile. That night, they fell asleep to the unfamiliar sounds of their new home, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through drafty windows, the tick of pipes expanding and contracting. In the darkness before dawn, Olivia woke suddenly, unsure what had pulled her from sleep. Ethan snored softly beside her, but something else had caught her attention. Music. Very faint but unmistakable. The delicate notes of a piano, playing a melody she didn't recognize. She sat up, listening harder. It seemed to be coming from somewhere, deep within the house. Ethan, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. Do you hear that? He grunted and rolled over. Hear what? That music, someone's playing piano. Ethan lifted his head, blinking groggily. I don't hear anything. Go back to sleep. It's probably just the wind. But it wasn't the wind. As Olivia lay back down, the melody continued, soft and sad and somehow inviting. Tomorrow, she decided, she would follow it to its source. She didn't know it yet, but Thornfield Manor had indeed chosen them, not as owners, but as caretakers. And the house had secrets it was finally ready to share. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Ethan tried to settle into life at Thornfield Manor. The enormity of what they had done hit them in waves, sometimes exciting, sometimes terrifying. Their furniture, which had seemed perfectly adequate in their apartment, was swallowed by the mansion's vast rooms. Their voices echoed in empty hallways. Even their footsteps sounded different on the aged wooden floors. We need a map just to find each other, Ethan joked one morning when it took him 15 minutes to locate Olivia in the sunroom at the back of the house. She was curled up in a dusty armchair by the window, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. I was following the light, she said. This room catches the morning sun perfectly. Ethan didn't mention that he'd been calling her name for 10 minutes with no response. There was something about the house that seemed to swallow sound in strange ways. He'd taken a leave of absence from his accounting job to focus on making the house livable. The plumbing needed work, the electrical system was dangerously outdated, and several windows were broken or cracked. Olivia, who worked remotely as a graphic designer, set up her office in a small room off the library that caught good natural light. Did you hear anything strange last night? She asked as Ethan sat on the arm of her chair. Like what? Like someone walking around in the upstairs hallway, around 3 a.m. Ethan frowned. I thought that was you. I was asleep next to you all night. They looked at each other, uncertain. The house made plenty of noises, the kind you'd expect from a building that had weathered over a century of seasons. But footsteps were different. Probably just the wood settling, Ethan said, but he didn't sound convinced. That afternoon, as Ethan worked on replacing a broken window in the dining room, he felt a sudden chill pass through him. October had brought cooler weather, but this was different, a cold that seemed to come from inside rather than outside. He turned, half expecting to see someone standing behind him. The dining room was empty, but a screwdriver he'd placed on the windowsill was now lying in the center of the large oak table. Weird, he muttered, retrieving it. He could have sworn he'd just used it a moment ago. The next day, Olivia ventured into town for supplies. Willowbrook was small, just a main street with a handful of shops, a diner, and a gas station. As she loaded groceries into their car, an elderly man approached her. You're staying at the Montgomery place, aren't you? He asked without introduction. Olivia nodded, surprised. Yes, we just moved in a few weeks ago. The old man studied her face, as if looking for something specific. House like that needs caretakers with strong hearts, he said finally. Been waiting a long time for the right ones. Before Olivia could ask what he meant, a woman called to him from across the street and he shuffled away with a small wave. When she told Ethan about the encounter that evening, he seemed troubled. Montgomery? The real estate agent never mentioned. A name. Maybe it's what locals call it, Olivia suggested. We should look up the history of the place. The next morning they drove to the Willowbrook Historical Society, housed in a brick building that had once been the town library. A bell jingled as they entered, and a white-haired woman looked up from a desk covered in old photographs. Welcome to Willowbrook, she said with a warm smile. I'm Peg, the society president. Are you the couple who bought Thornfield Manor? News travels fast around here, Ethan said, shaking her hand. Small towns, Peg replied with a shrug. What can I help you with today? We're hoping to learn about the history of our house, Olivia explained. Someone called it the Montgomery place, and we realized we know almost nothing about it. Peg's eyes lit up. Oh, the Montgomerys, one of Willowbrook's founding families. Built that house in 1905 when the railroad brought money to the area. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a large leather-bound book. This is a record of the prominent families in the county. She flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for. Here we are. William Montgomery, railroad tycoon and entrepreneur. She turned the book so they could see a black and white photograph of a stern-looking man with a thick mustache, standing in front of what was unmistakably their house. Beside him stood a woman in a high-necked dress, her expression solemn. "That's Charlotte, his wife," Peg explained. "And this," she pointed to a small girl standing between them, "is their daughter, Eleanor." "Is there any connection to me?" Ethan asked. "My last name is Montgomery, too." Peg looked surprised. "Is it really? Well, isn't that something? Could be a coincidence, of course. Montgomery isn't that uncommon a name." They spent the next hour going through records, learning that William had built the mansion as a symbol of his success, sparing no expense. The family had been prominent in local society, hosting parties and charity events. "What happened to them?" Olivia asked. Peg's expression grew somber. "A tragedy, I'm afraid. In 1925, Eleanor disappeared on the day she was supposed to be married. Just vanished without a trace. William was devastated. Died less than a year later. Heart attack, they said, but people whispered it was really a broken heart." "And the house?" "Passed through various family members who never stayed long. Eventually, it fell into disrepair. There have been a few owners over the years, but no one seems to stay more than a few months." "Any idea why?" Ethan asked. Peg hesitated. "Well, some people claim the house is restless. Not that I believe in such things, mind you." They left with photocopies of newspaper clippings and a promise from Peg to let them know if she found anything else. Driving home, they were quieter than usual, each lost in thought about the history of their new home. "Your name is Montgomery," Olivia said suddenly. "And the old man in town said the house had been waiting for the right caretakers." "It's just a coincidence," Ethan insisted, "and houses don't wait for people." But when they pulled up to Thornfield Manor, silhouetted against the setting sun, they both felt a strange sense that the house was indeed waiting and watching. That night, Olivia woke again to the sound of piano music. This time, she slipped out of bed without waking Ethan and followed the melody through the dark hallways. It led her to the grand piano in the sitting room, but when she entered, the music stopped, and the room was empty. The piano sat silent, its cover closed. "Hello?" she called softly, feeling foolish. "Is someone there?" Nothing but silence answered her. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small silver hairpin lying on the floor beside the piano. She picked it up, examining the delicate filigree work. It looked antique, possibly from the 1920s. When she returned to bed, Ethan was sitting up, looking worried. "Where did you go?" he asked. "I heard the music again, from the piano." He frowned. "Liv, there was no music. I woke up because the bedroom door closed." The next morning, Olivia placed the hairpin on the kitchen counter while they ate breakfast. "I found this by the piano last night." Ethan examined it. "Probably been there for decades. This place is full of old stuff. It wasn't there yesterday. I dusted that whole room." Before Ethan could respond, a loud crash came from upstairs. They raced up the grand staircase and found that a mirror in the hallway had fallen, shattering across the floor. "The nail must have given way," Ethan said, kneeling to pick up the larger pieces of glass. Olivia nodded, but as she helped clean up, she noticed something odd. There was no nail in the wall, no hook, nothing that would have held the mirror in place. Strange. Incidents continued throughout the week. Doors that were closed would be found open. Items moved from where they'd been left. A child's porcelain doll, discovered in a trunk in the attic, appeared in different places around the house. First on the windowsill in the sitting room, then at the dining table, then at the foot of the stairs. "Very funny," Ethan said, assuming Olivia was playing tricks on him. "It's not me," she insisted. "I thought it was you." They stared at each other, the unspoken question hanging between them. If neither of them was moving the doll, who was? On Friday, Olivia was working in her office when she heard footsteps in the library outside her door. Thinking Ethan had come in from the yard where he'd been raking leaves, she called out to him. No answer, but the footsteps continued, moving toward the locked door in the corner that Mrs. Henderson had pointed out during their tour. Olivia stepped into the library just in time to see the brass doorknob of that supposedly locked door turning slowly. Her heart pounding, she approached. "Hello?" The movement stopped. When she tried the knob herself, it was locked tight, just as it had always been. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace trying to distract themselves with a movie on Ethan's laptop, a framed photograph fell from the mantelpiece. It was one of the old pictures they'd found in the house, a formal portrait of a young woman in a graduation dress. Olivia picked it up, the glass now cracked in a spiderweb pattern that almost obscured the subject's face. But not quite. For the first time she looked closely at the young woman's features. "Ethan," she said slowly, "look at this picture. Really look at it." He took it from her, his expression changing as he studied it. "Is this Eleanor Montgomery?" "I think so." "And doesn't she look familiar?" He stared a moment longer, then looked up at Olivia with wide eyes. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same heart-shaped face, the same wide-set eyes. Eleanor Montgomery could have been Olivia's sister. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Olivia found herself drawn once more to the locked door in the library. This time, when she approached, she noticed something different, a thin sliver of light showing beneath it. Holding her breath, she tried the knob. It turned easily in her hand. The door swung open, and Olivia caught her breath. After weeks of wondering what lay behind the locked door in the library, she was finally about to find out. The room beyond was bathed in soft light from an antique lamp on a bedside table, though she couldn't imagine how it could be lit. Stepping inside felt like crossing into another time. Unlike the rest of the house, which showed signs of different eras and owners, this room appeared frozen in the 1920s. A four-poster bed with delicate lace hangings dominated the space. A vanity table sat beneath a window, its surface arranged, with silver-backed hairbrushes, crystal perfume bottles, and an ornate hand mirror. In the corner stood a mannequin draped with a wedding dress, yellowed with age but still beautiful, with pearl beading and a long train folded carefully on the floor. This had been Eleanor Montgomery's bedroom, preserved exactly as she'd left it on the day she disappeared. Olivia moved through the room in a daze, touching nothing but taking in every detail. A bookshelf held leather-bound classics and a collection of dried flowers pressed between glass frames. On the wall hung framed photographs, Eleanor with her parents, Eleanor in a riding habit beside a dappled horse, Eleanor with a group of smiling friends. On the bedside table lay an open book, a bookmark still in place, as if its reader had just stepped away for a moment and would soon return. Beside it was a small journal bound in blue leather. Olivia hesitated, then picked up the journal. It felt wrong to invade Eleanor's privacy even after a century, but something told her this was important, that perhaps the house itself wanted her to find it. She sat gingerly on the edge of the bed and opened to the first page. April 12, 1924. Father has finally agreed to let me attend courses at the Women's College in Boston this fall. Mother says it's not proper for a young lady of my standing, but I long to study literature and perhaps become a teacher someday. The handwriting was elegant, sloping across the page in blue ink. Olivia turned to a random entry from later in the journal. September 8, 1924. I met the most unusual man today. James Harper, the new groundskeeper Father hired while I was away, at school. He caught me when I nearly fell from the ladder in the orchard. He has the most remarkable eyes, green as the moss by the creek, and he speaks about plants as if they have souls. Father would be furious if he knew I stopped to talk with a worker, but James has read more books than anyone I've ever met despite never attending university. Olivia flipped through more pages, catching glimpses of a secret friendship that blossomed into something more. Met James by the old oak after sunset. Brought him my copy of Whitman's poems. First kiss in the rain. Father would never understand. The entries grew more frequent and intense as months passed, documenting a forbidden romance conducted through secret meetings and hidden notes. June 15, 1925. Father has announced my engagement to Thomas Wellington. I've only met the man twice. He's 20 years older than me and smells of cigars and brandy. When I protested, Father threatened to fire James and ensure he never works in this county again. I locked myself in my room and cried until I had no tears left. Olivia was so engrossed in the journal that she didn't hear Ethan calling her name until he appeared in the doorway. Liv? How did you? He stopped mid-sentence, taking in the preserved bedroom. What is this place? She looked up, tears in her eyes. It's Eleanor's room, and I think I know what happened to her. Ethan stepped inside cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. How is this room still like this, after all these years? I don't know. But look. She handed him the journal, open to one of the later entries. July 28, 1925. It's decided. James and I will leave tomorrow night. He's purchased train tickets to Chicago, where his cousin can help us find work. I'll bring only what I can carry, plus Mother's jewelry that Father gave me for the wedding. By the time they discover I'm gone, we'll be hundreds of miles away. I feel terrible about the pain this will cause Mother, but I cannot marry Thomas. I would rather die. So she planned to run away, Ethan said, looking around the room with new understanding. But she never made it. Olivia took back the journal and turned to the final entry, dated August 1st, 1925, the day before Eleanor's wedding. Father was in a rage at dinner. I fear he suspects something. James and I agreed to move our plan forward. We'll meet at midnight by the old oak tree instead of waiting until tomorrow. I've packed a small bag and hidden it under my bed. Mother's jewelry is sewn into the lining of my coat. In just a few hours, I'll be free. I'm frightened, but also filled with a strange happiness. Whatever happens, I know I'm making the right choice. That was the last entry. The remaining pages were blank. She never wrote again, Olivia said softly. Whatever happened, it happened that night. A sudden gust of wind blew through the room, although the windows were closed. The lamp flickered and the door slammed shut with a bang that made them both jump. We should go, Ethan said, his voice tight. This doesn't feel right. But when he tried the door, the knob wouldn't turn. They were locked in. Ethan, Olivia whispered, pointing to the vanity mirror. In its reflection, they could see the room as it was, but with a shadowy figure sitting at the vanity brushing long hair. Though transparent, the figure was clearly a young woman in a nightgown. As they watched, frozen in shock, she turned slightly, revealing a profile that matched the photographs on the wall. Eleanor. The ghostly figure didn't seem to notice them. She continued brushing her hair, then stood and moved to the bed, reaching underneath to pull out a small suitcase. She opened it on the bed and began placing items inside. A hairbrush, a small book, a framed photograph. She's reliving that night, Olivia breathed. The temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath came out in clouds of vapor as they huddled together, watching the ghost of Eleanor Montgomery prepare for an escape that history said never happened. The phantom Eleanor closed her suitcase, donned a coat, and looked around the room one last time. Then she walked straight toward them and through them, sending a chill through their bodies that felt like being drenched in ice water. The moment she passed through, the door clicked open. They didn't speak as they hurried back to their bedroom, both too shaken by what they'd witnessed. That night they lay awake side by side, listening to the storm that had blown in, bringing thunder that shook the old house to its foundations. What do you think happened to her? Ethan finally asked as lightning illuminated their room. I don't know, but I think she wants us to find out. The storm raged through the night and into the next day. By afternoon, the wind had died down, but rain still fell in sheets, drumming against the windows. Olivia sat in the library, reading through Eleanor's journal again, while Ethan paced nervously. We should leave, he said suddenly. Just pack, up and go. Olivia looked up in surprise. We can't leave now. Don't you want to know what happened? No, I don't. This isn't some mystery novel, Liv. This is our life. We bought a house that's clearly haunted, and now you want to play detective? It's not about playing anything, it's about helping her. Helping who? A ghost? She's been dead for 100 years. We don't know that she's dead, Olivia insisted, though even as she said it, She knew it wasn't true. Something terrible had happened to Eleanor Montgomery, and deep down she already knew what it was. A tremendous crash from above cut their argument short. They raced upstairs to find that part of the ceiling in the west wing had collapsed under the weight of rainwater, leaving a gaping hole. Water poured in, soaking the carpet and the furniture beneath. "Get buckets," Ethan shouted, already running to check if the damage extended to other rooms. For the next few hours, they worked frantically to contain the water and salvage what they could. The storm had damaged part of the roof over what had once been the mansion's library. Water had seeped into the walls, causing a section of ancient plaster to give way. As Ethan cleared away fallen debris, he noticed something odd about the exposed wall. "Liv, come look at this." Behind the broken plaster was a small compartment hidden within the wall itself. Inside was a metal box, green with age. They carried it downstairs to the kitchen, leaving puddles in their wake. The box was locked, but the ancient mechanism gave way easily when Ethan pried at it with a screwdriver. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from moisture, was another journal. Older and more worn than Eleanor's, bound in brown, leather with a monogram embossed on the cover. W.M. "William Montgomery," Olivia whispered, untying the string that held it closed. Unlike Eleanor's flowing script, William's handwriting was harsh and angular, slashing across the pages like knife cuts. The entries were sporadic, mostly business notes and complaints about workers or business rivals. Then, starting in June 1925, the tone changed. Caught Eleanor walking with that gardener boy again. Warned her to mind her place. Wellington is a good match, wealthy, connected. The girl thinks life is a romance novel. Eleanor refusing to help with wedding preparations. Charlotte says to give her time, women and their vapors. The wedding will proceed as planned. As they read further, William's writing grew more agitated, the pen sometimes tearing through the paper with the force of his anger. Found a train ticket in Eleanor's coat. Chicago. The ungrateful child planned to run off with that penniless dirt digger. I've locked her in her room until the wedding. Posted Thomas's man outside her door. And then, the final entry, dated August 2, 1925. It is done. May God forgive me. No one must ever know. Olivia and Ethan stared at the journal, then at each other, a cold understanding passing between them. The old oak tree, Olivia said. She was supposed to meet James there at midnight, and her father followed her. Ethan finished grimly. Outside, the storm had finally stopped. The setting sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the grounds of Thornfield Manor. In the distance stood an ancient oak tree, its massive branches extending like gnarled fingers against the darkening sky. Something was buried beneath that tree, and now, after a century of silence, the secret was about to be revealed. Dawn broke over Thornfield Manor, pale light washing across the muddy grounds still littered with branches and debris from the storm. Olivia stood at the kitchen window, watching Ethan trudge toward the old oak tree, shovel in hand. She hadn't slept at all, her mind racing with the terrible possibilities suggested by William Montgomery's final journal entry. It is done. May God forgive me. What exactly had William done that required forgiveness? And what lay beneath that ancient oak tree? She poured another cup of coffee with shaking hands and headed outside to join her husband. The air was cool and damp, smelling of wet earth and fallen leaves. Ethan had already begun digging when she reached him, his shovel biting into the soft ground at the base of the massive tree. You don't have to be here for this, he said, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead despite the morning chill. Go back to the house. I need to know, she replied simply, setting her coffee on a nearby rock. Let me help. They took turns, with the shovel, digging steadily as the sun climbed higher. Olivia tried not to think about what they might find, or what they would do if they found it. After an hour, they had created a sizable hole about 3 feet deep. Maybe we're in the wrong spot, Ethan said, leaning on the shovel. This tree is huge. They could be anywhere around here. They? Olivia looked up sharply. Ethan met her eyes. Eleanor and James, You know that's what we're looking for. She nodded slowly. They hadn't spoken it aloud until now, but they both suspected the truth. William Montgomery had followed his daughter that night, confronted her and her lover, and then, what? The final entry in his journal suggested something unforgivable. Let's try over there, she suggested, pointing to a spot where the tree's largest root protruded from the ground like a giant serpent. If I were burying something I didn't want found, I'd put it under a root. Ethan started digging in the new location. The work was harder here, with smaller roots crisscrossing through the soil. He had gone down about 2 feet when his shovel hit something solid with a dull thud. They froze, looking at each other. That wasn't a rock, Ethan said quietly. He dropped to his knees and began clearing dirt away with his hands. Olivia joined him, her heart pounding. Soon they had uncovered what appeared to be a piece of fabric, rotted and discolored by time but still recognizable as cloth. Ethan sat back on his heels. We should call the police. And tell them what? That our 100-year-old haunted house led us to dig up what might be a century-old grave? It's still a crime scene, Liv. From 1925, nobody's going to care except us. That's not the point. If these are human remains, then they're Eleanor and James, and they deserve to finally be found, to have their story told. She touched his arm. Let's at least see what's here before we decide. Reluctantly, Ethan continued digging, widening the hole carefully. What they gradually uncovered stole the breath from their lungs. 2 skeletons, lying side by side, their bones entangled as if in an embrace. One wore the tattered remains of what might have been a nightgown, while the other was dressed in decayed work clothes. Oh my God, Olivia whispered, tears filling her eyes. It's them. Caught between the skeletons was a small leather bag, remarkably well preserved beneath the layers of dirt. Ethan lifted it gently. Inside they found 2 train tickets to Chicago, dated August 1st, 1925, and a collection of jewelry, pearls, diamond rings, and a gold locket. Her mother's jewelry, Olivia said, just like she wrote in her journal. They stared at the grim discovery, the reality of what had happened that night finally clear. William Montgomery had caught his daughter and her lover as they tried to escape. Whatever happened next had ended with both young people buried secretly beneath the oak tree, their dreams of freedom dying with them. We need to call the sheriff, Ethan said firmly. This isn't just history anymore. It's murder. This time Olivia didn't argue. Sheriff Hansen was a stocky woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen everything a small town could offer, though she admitted this was a first. She stood by the excavated grave, hands on her hips, listening, as Ethan and Olivia explained their discovery. Let me get this straight, she said when they finished. You bought this place 2 months ago, started experiencing what you believe is paranormal activity, found hidden journals from 1925, and dug up these remains based on what you read? I know how it sounds, Ethan admitted. The sheriff sighed. Thornfield Manor has always had stories attached to it. Never thought I'd be dealing with actual bodies, though. She turned to a deputy who was taking photographs of the scene. Call the county medical examiner and get the state police on the line. This is beyond our resources. By afternoon, the property was crawling with officials. Yellow police tape surrounded the oak tree. The medical examiner, a bald man with thick glasses, supervised the careful removal of the remains, while state police investigators combed the area for additional evidence. Olivia and Ethan watched, from the porch, feeling strangely disconnected from the activity, as if they were watching a movie rather than something happening on their own property. What happens now? Olivia asked as a forensic technician bagged the jewelry they had found. They'll take the remains to the lab, try to make a formal identification, Sheriff Hansen explained, joining them on the porch. Though given the journals and other evidence, I think we all know who they are. And then? Then it becomes a matter for the courts even after all this time. Murder has no statute of limitations. But William Montgomery is long dead, Ethan pointed out. True, but there might be descendants who have a claim to the estate. And there will need to be a proper burial for the victims. The sheriff studied them thoughtfully. You folks planning to stay here after all this? Ethan and Olivia exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed it yet. I don't know, Olivia said honestly. This place was supposed to be our dream home, but now, well, I wouldn't make any hasty decisions, Sheriff Hansen advised. Once the media gets hold of this story, things are going to get complicated. She was right. By the next morning, news vans lined the road leading to Thornfield Manor. Reporters camped at the gate, hoping for a glimpse of what the local paper had already dubbed the Montgomery Mystery. The story spread quickly. A young couple purchases a historic mansion only to discover the century-old remains of star-crossed lovers murdered on the eve of their escape. Peg from the Historical Society called to tell them that people were already coming into town asking questions about the Montgomery family. It's the most excitement Willowbrook has seen in decades, she said. Olivia and Ethan retreated deeper into the house, avoiding windows and ignoring the ringing phone, but they couldn't escape the growing media frenzy or the intensifying supernatural activity within the mansion itself. The piano in the sitting room played by itself day and night. Doors slammed with no one near them. The temperature fluctuated wildly, freezing 1 minute and stifling the next. The porcelain doll from the attic appeared and reappeared throughout the house, sometimes in places they had just checked moments before. It's like the house is having a breakdown, Ethan said as they huddled in the kitchen, the only room that seemed relatively unaffected by the paranormal chaos. Or Eleanor is, Olivia suggested. Think about it. Her secret has been buried for 100 years and now suddenly everyone knows. Her father's crime is exposed. Maybe she doesn't know how to process that. 3 days after the discovery, the medical examiner confirmed what they already knew. The remains belonged to a young woman and man, both in their early 20s, who had died from blunt force trauma to the skull. Based on clothing fragments and the artifacts found with them, the deaths were estimated to have occurred in 1925. That evening, a state police detective named Reynolds interviewed them at length, focusing particularly on the journals. These are crucial evidence, he explained, carefully placing Eleanor's diary into an evidence bag. They establish motive and essentially provide witness testimony, even after all this time. What will happen to William Montgomery's reputation? Olivia asked. He was considered a founding father of Willowbrook, Detective Reynolds shrugged. History gets rewritten all the time when new evidence comes to light. The Montgomery name won't be remembered quite the same way after this. After he left, they sat in the library, surrounded by the weight of history and the lingering presence of those who had come before them. Maybe we should sell, Ethan suggested quietly. After all this dies down, of course. Olivia shook her head. I don't think we can, not yet. She gazed around at the bookshelves, the fireplace, the now open door to Eleanor's bedroom. Don't you feel it? There's still something unfinished here. As if in response, the chandelier above them flickered, though the rest of the lights remained steady. I think she's still here, Olivia continued. Eleanor, and maybe James too. They never got their justice, never got to be together in life. We can't just walk away. That night, as they prepared for bed, the paranormal activity reached a fever pitch. Picture frames flew off walls. Books launched themselves from shelves. The temperature dropped so drastically that their breath clouded in the air, and then in the corner of their bedroom, a figure materialized, the translucent form of a young woman in a nightgown, her face a mirror image of Olivia's own. Beside her appeared a second figure, a tall young man in work clothes, his hand protectively on her shoulder. Olivia and Ethan clung to each other, watching as the spectral couple regarded them silently. Then, slowly, Eleanor raised her hand, pointing urgently toward the window. Outside, beyond the lawn where police had finally removed their tape and equipment, the old oak tree stood silhouetted against the night sky. Something was happening there, a strange blue-white light pulsing at its base. They want us to go back to the tree, Olivia whispered. The ghosts nodded in unison, their expressions pleading. Despite their fear, Olivia and Ethan understood. The mystery wasn't solved yet. The true story of what happened that August night in 1925 was still waiting to be told, and Eleanor and James needed their help to tell it. The blue-white light pulsed beneath the oak tree like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the lawn. Olivia and Ethan approached slowly, the damp grass soaking their shoes. Behind them, the ghostly figures of Eleanor and James followed, their translucent forms drifting inches above the ground. "What are we looking for?" Ethan whispered, though. He wasn't sure why he felt the need to be quiet. The light seemed to be coming from the hole they had dug days earlier, which the police had expanded during their investigation. When they reached the edge, they saw that the excavation was now much deeper than before. Whether from the officers' work or some supernatural force, they couldn't tell. Eleanor's ghost moved forward, hovering at the edge of the pit. She pointed, downward, her expression urgent. "There's something else down there," Olivia said, kneeling to peer into the darkness. Something they didn't find. Ethan took out his phone and switched on the flashlight, aiming it into the hole. At first, he saw nothing but dirt and tree roots. Then, as he adjusted the angle, a glint of metal caught the light. Something small, half buried in the wall of the pit, several inches below where the skeletons had been found. "I see it," he said, handing the phone to Olivia and lowering himself into the hole. The dirt was still loose from the recent excavation, making it easy for him to dig with his hands. After a few moments, he uncovered a small metal object and lifted it carefully, a pocket watch, its silver case tarnished with age. "This was in deeper than the bodies," he said, climbing back out. "Like it was buried first and then—" He didn't finish the sentence, but they both understood the implication. William Montgomery had hidden this watch before burying his daughter and her lover. Olivia took the watch, turning it over in her hands. The case was elaborately engraved, with intertwining vines and flowers, and in the center a set of initials. J.H. "James Harper," she breathed. She pressed the small button on top, and to their surprise, the case popped open. Inside was a faded photograph of Eleanor, smiling in a way they had never seen in her formal portraits. On the inside of the cover, an inscription had been etched by hand. "To James. Time will never change my love for you. Yours always, Eleanor." The ghostly couple had drawn closer, watching intently. When Olivia held up the watch for them to see, Eleanor's spirit reached out as if to touch it, her transparent fingers passing through the metal. "It was a gift," Olivia said softly. But why would William bury it separately from the bodies? As if in answer, James's ghost moved to the oak tree itself, placing his hand against the massive trunk. The blue-white light intensified, illuminating the bark in a strange pattern. "Look at the tree," Ethan said, stepping closer. What they had taken for natural knots and whorls in the bark now seemed to form letters. Or rather, the ghost light revealed carved letters that had been overgrown by decades of new bark. J plus, A inside a rough heart shape. They carved their initials in the tree, Olivia said. This was their special place even before that night. The realization hit them both at the same time. The story they had pieced together wasn't complete. William Montgomery hadn't merely followed his daughter to the oak tree and killed her and James in a rage. He had known about their meeting place, all along. He was waiting for them, Ethan said grimly. He found the watch first. Maybe James dropped it or William took it from him during a confrontation at the house. He came here and buried it, then waited for them to arrive. Eleanor's ghost nodded, her sad eyes confirming the theory. He planned it, Olivia whispered. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated murder. The implications were chilling. William Montgomery, respected founder of Willowbrook, had deliberately killed his own daughter and her lover, then returned to the mansion to create the story of her mysterious disappearance on the eve of her wedding. The ghosts seemed agitated, now moving restlessly around the tree. James pointed toward the house, then back at the watch in Olivia's hand. I think they want us to take it back to the house, Ethan suggested. As they walked back toward Thornfield Manor, the ghostly couple drifted ahead of them, sometimes vanishing, only to reappear further along the path. The mansion loomed against the night sky, every window blazing with light, though they had left most of the rooms dark. Inside, the paranormal activity had intensified to an alarming degree. Furniture slid across floors. Doors opened and closed in rapid succession. The grand piano played a frantic, discordant melody that echoed through the halls. The ghosts led them not to Eleanor's preserved bedroom as they expected, but to William Montgomery's study, a room they had been using as a storage space since moving in. "What are we looking for?" Olivia asked, setting the pocket watch on the massive oak desk that dominated the room. In response, James's ghost moved to the wall where a large portrait of William Montgomery hung in a gilt frame. The stern-faced man gazed down at them disapprovingly, his hand resting on a walking stick. James gestured at the portrait, then made a turning motion with his hands. Behind the painting, Ethan guessed, stepping forward to lift the heavy frame from its hooks. Behind the portrait was a wall safe, its dial gleaming dully in the light. "Of course a man like William would have a safe," Olivia said, "but we don't know the combination." Eleanor drifted to the desk, her ghostly finger tracing numbers in the dust. 8/1/25, August 1st, 1925, Ethan realized. The night they died. He turned the dial carefully. Right to 8, left to 1, right to 25. With a click, the safe door swung open. Inside was a single item, a leather-bound book similar to the journal they had already found, but larger and more formal in appearance. When Olivia carefully removed it, they saw gold lettering on the cover. The last will and testament of William Montgomery. They opened it on the desk, scanning the formal legal language until they reached a passage that made them both freeze. In the event of my daughter Eleanor's marriage to Thomas Wellington, I bequeath to them the property known as Thornfield Manor and all its contents, to be held in trust for their children and descendants in perpetuity. Should Eleanor fail to fulfill her duty to the Montgomery name through this advantageous union, Thornfield Manor shall pass instead to my brother Richard Montgomery and his male heirs, with the provision that Eleanor herself shall never again set foot upon these grounds, nor claim any right to the Montgomery fortune. He was going to disinherit her, Olivia said, stunned by the cruelty of it. But when she tried to escape with James, he decided to make sure she could never come back at all. Ethan finished grimly. They continued reading, discovering that, after Eleanor's disappearance, William had indeed changed his will, leaving everything to his brother Richard, Ethan's distant ancestor. The mansion had remained in the Montgomery family for decades, passing through various branches until falling into disrepair and eventually being sold to outsiders. "That's why the house called to us," Olivia said, looking up at the ghostly couple who hovered nearby. "You're a Montgomery, Ethan." The house was trying to come back to the family, but not to William's chosen line, to Eleanor's true love. As if in confirmation, the pocket watch on the desk suddenly sprang open, the photograph of Eleanor somehow restored to perfect clarity despite its age. Next to it, William's will began to smoke, then burst into flame, burning with an unnatural, blue fire that consumed the paper but left the desk untouched. When the flames died out, all that remained was a pile of ash and the pocket watch. The ghostly figures of Eleanor and James had drawn closer together, their forms seeming more solid, now more present. For the first time they spoke, not with voices but with thoughts that somehow formed in Olivia and Ethan's minds. "The truth is known. Justice is done. We can rest now." Before their eyes the spirits began to change, their translucent forms glowing brighter, their faces, once sad and pleading, now peaceful. Eleanor's ghost reached out, touching Olivia's cheek with fingers that felt like the whisper of a cool breeze. James nodded to Ethan, a gesture of respect and gratitude between men separated by a century, but united by an unexpected bond. Then, hand in hand, the ghosts walked toward the window, their light growing so intense that Olivia and Ethan had to shield their eyes. When they looked again, the spirits were gone, but through the window they could see 2 points of light drifting toward the old oak tree, where they paused briefly before rising into the night sky and fading among the stars. In that moment, the house changed. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over Thornfield Manor since they arrived lifted like fog burning away in the morning sun. The paranormal activity ceased. The air grew warmer, lighter, as if the house itself could finally breathe again. "They're at peace," Olivia said softly, taking Ethan's hand. Both of them. In the weeks that followed, They worked with Detective Reynolds to document the new evidence of William Montgomery's premeditated murder. The pocket watch, with its inscription and photograph, proved that Eleanor and James had been in a relationship long before the night they died, supporting the theory that William had planned the killings. The town of Willowbrook had to reconcile this dark truth with their proud history. Plaques bearing William Montgomery's name were quietly removed from public buildings. The street once named after him was rechristened Eleanor Way. With the permission of what remained of the Harper family, traced through Old Town records, Olivia and Ethan arranged for Eleanor and James to be properly buried side by side in the town cemetery, beneath a headstone that read, Eleanor Montgomery and James Harper, separated in life, united in death, their love endured beyond time. The media attention eventually faded. The reporters packed up their cameras and moved on to newer stories. Thornfield Manor, once a subject of morbid fascination, gradually returned to anonymity. What now? Ethan asked one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Do we stay or sell? Olivia looked out at the grounds, at the old oak tree now peaceful in the fading light. I think we stay, she said. This is where we belong. Because I'm a Montgomery? She smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. Because our child is a Montgomery, and this is their rightful home. Ethan's eyes widened as he understood what she was telling him. Yes, she said, her smile growing. I took the test yesterday. In about 7 months there will be a new generation of Montgomerys at Thornfield Manor. As if in blessing, a warm breeze swept across the porch, carrying the scent of roses from the garden they had started to restore. Inside the house, the piano played a few soft notes, not the mournful melody they had heard before, but something lighter, joyful. Eleanor and James were gone, their spirits at peace. But perhaps a small part of them remained, watching over the house they had loved and the family that would now bring new life to its halls. Thornfield Manor had kept its secret for 100 years. Now, finally, it could be what it was always meant to be, a home.